Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 8 of Victory Garden for Maine, brought to you by the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. My name's Marjorie, and with me today are Vina, Kate, and Lori. In this video, we'll be discussing what to do with your harvest. Lori, you have our first question?
Kate, my garden is about to be overflowing, and I want to be prepared with ways to save some of that produce to enjoy later. What do you recommend that I do?
I'm going to recommend you get reacquainted with your freezer. Freezing is an easy and economical way to preserve your garden harvest for later. Freezing fruits and vegetables creates a texture that is closer to fresh than canning does and preserves nutritional value if the produce is frozen at the peak of its ripeness.
Great, I'm in. So what do I need to do to freeze my homegrown vegetables and fruits?
Well, first you need to gather your supplies for freezing. Helpful supplies for freezing include freezer-grade plastic or glass containers, a stock pot for blanching vegetables, and if you want to splurge, a vacuum sealer. Most vegetables need to be blanched before freezing for best quality. Blanching means to dip briefly in boiling water. This step kills enzymes inside the vegetable that are causing it to ripen. If you don't deactivate these enzymes, they will cause undesirable changes in color, texture, and flavor in your frozen vegetables. Peppers, onions, and tomatoes do not need to be blanched before freezing, which means freezing tomatoes whole or cut up in the late summer is a cinch. Same with freezing fruit. It does not need to be blanched before freezing. You should prepare the fruit as you'll want to eat it to make it easy for use in baking, preserving, or cooking. That means to wash, peel, slice, and pit your fruit as needed. Then package it in freezer-grade containers and pop it in the freezer. Frozen fruits and vegetables are best used within 8 months for best quality.
Thanks, Kate. Sounds doable. So what if I want to can some beautiful jams and pickles like I see on Pinterest?
You can do that too. So jams, jellies, pickles, relishes, and some tomato products, including salsa, can all be canned using a boiling water bath canner. Heat is transferred to the food in the jar by the boiling water that surrounds the jar. The process kills off most of the spoilage organisms in the jar, such as mold, yeast, and bacteria. You can can foods that are either naturally acidic, such as fruit and tomatoes, or have added acid, like the vinegar in pickles and relish, or lemons or lime juice in salsa. Foods that aren't acidic enough run the risk of developing botulism after being canned. So it's really important to follow a tested recipe for boiling water bath canning from a trusted source, like any from Cooperative Extension, USDA, or Ball. While your favorite food blog or YouTube channel might have a really delicious sounding recipe, you really want to be sure that the recipe has been tested for safety so you can enjoy your home canned goods with confidence.
Gotcha. Safety is paramount. So what do I need to start canning?
The boiling water bath method is the most accessible way to start canning. A boiling water bath canner can be made from a big pot with a rack in the bottom. The rack helps to keep the jars off the hot metal surface, which could cause them to break, and allows water to circulate around them, which is important for the heat penetration of the food in the jars. The pot also has to be deep enough to cover your jars by 1 to 2 inches of water. You can purchase a boiling water bath canner for about $25 from hardware stores, big box stores, and online retailers. Then you'll need canning jars, glass jars made for repeated heating and cooling, the 2-part lids that come with them, and some tools that help make the process easier. The other kind of canning is pressure canning, and this is the canning process you need to preserve what we call low-acid foods, or plain, meaning not pickled, vegetables and meats. This process uses heat in a sealed container to build steam, which is hotter than boiling water, getting up to 240 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature is high enough to kill bacterial spores in low-acid food. Many people are intimidated by pressure canning, but rest assured it's a safe process with equipment that has had some updates since your grandmother did it. UMaine Extension offers free dial gauge testing to ensure your pressure canner is reading accurately. Just contact your local county office to make an appointment to have your gauge tested.
What are some low-energy ways to preserve your homegrown produce?
Dehydration and fermentation are both great options that use less energy and produce less heat than canning, which is really nice this time of year when the temperatures are starting to creep up. In dehydration, water is removed from food to reduce opportunities for pathogens to grow. This process creates lightweight, shelf-stable snacks and meals, but it does require you to purchase an electric dehydrator. In Maine, due to our weather conditions, we don't have the high temperatures and low humidity for outdoor drying like in the southwestern United States, where many commercial dehydrating fruit operations are located. You can air dry herbs or even use the microwave oven for small batches, which can come in handy with those large garden harvests.
Fermentation is another low-tech way to preserve your garden produce. In this process, lactic acid formation occurs through bacteria naturally present on the vegetables. This acidic environment keeps molds, yeasts, and bacteria from growing, making a safe environment for your pickled foods. Fermenting is a way to create a pickled flavor without adding any vinegar. Popular fermented foods include pickles, sauerkraut, and kimchi. But because this process relies on bacteria, it can be trickier to master, and many things can go wrong to spoil your product. Temperature control is particularly important, with the ideal range for fermentation happening between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Any warmer than this and your food will become unpleasantly soft or spoil. So it can be difficult to master in the warm summer months unless you have a climate-controlled environment. But with a little perseverance, you can make these uniquely flavored foods at home.
Thanks, Kate. I'm inspired. Finally, let's talk about root cellaring. I dream of having a cellar stocked with homed canned goods and root vegetables. Is that something I can make happen, Vina?
Certainly. A root cellar is a great way to extend the life of your garden vegetables without too much input. The big thing you need to know is that different vegetables have different temperature and humidity requirements to avoid spoilage. For instance, onions and garlic like it cool with a temperature of around 36 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit and dry, while carrots, beets, and cabbage prefer colder temps of around 32 to 36 and a higher moisture level. So think of spaces in your home that might meet the storage conditions of the various vegetables you're hoping to store. Is your basement heated or unheated? Wet or dry? Are there unused rooms in your home that in the winter are cool but not really cold? I've heard of people having good success storing winter squash, for example, underneath a guest bed in an unheated room. So think about the whole house rather than just the cellar. Gather some data on your home by purchasing a thermometer that measures temperature and humidity levels. This will help you figure out where to store your crops to meet their temperature and humidity requirements and extend their storage time. We have a fact sheet at UMaine Extension that details the different storage requirements for various fruit and vegetables. Start your root cellar plan now to be prepared for the fall harvest.
Great overview of ways to preserve your harvest. Can you share some of your favorite preserving tips and tricks that beginners can get started with?
Sure. In the summer, I like to freeze fruit like strawberries, blueberries, peaches, and cherries to use later in baking and preserving, and to make freezer jam. It's so easy and maintains that fresh fruit flavor. Freezing tomatoes whole, halved, or cut into pieces with their skins on is so easy when the garden is producing so many tomatoes. Herbs air dry really well, and freezing chopped herbs in water, oil, or broth is also a great option. Or you can freeze herb pesto in ice cube trays. Making refrigerator pickles is a quick and easy way to use up small amounts of assorted garden produce. You can find the process for all of these methods in our Let's Preserve fact sheets, as well as at the National Center for Home Food Preservation through the University of Georgia's Cooperative Extension, as well as in the USDA's Complete Guide to Home Canning.
Thanks, Vina and Kate. Now let's talk about what happens after we harvest our fruits and vegetables from the garden. Vina, can you share tips for fall garden cleanup?
Now that you've put up all your produce for the winter, it's time to turn your attention to putting the garden to bed. After everything has been harvested, you'll want to remove all tools and debris like plastic mulch, landscape fabric, trellises, and stakes, and clean and store those for next year. Materials that are left in the garden can provide a home for unwanted overwintering pests. After the first killing frost, you'll also want to remove dead plants. You can go ahead and put those in the compost pile as long as you haven't had any issues with plant diseases. Once you've removed everything from the garden, you're going to want to add something to cover the soil. Leaving your soil exposed will cause it to leach valuable nutrients and be a blank slate for weed seeds. Mulching helps to avoid those while also adding organic matter to the soil, which will help you improve your soil for next year's garden.
What are some options for types of mulch?
A great choice for mulch would be the dead leaves that are falling this time of year. You can rake them up and add them directly to your beds, or you can run your lawnmower over them to shred them, which will help them keep from matting and blowing away. If you don't have enough leaves, some other good options include seaweed, burlap, cardboard, or straw. If you opt for straw, you just want to make sure that you're getting straw and not hay. Hay contains a lot more seed heads than straw. Straw should be applied at a depth of about 6 inches because it does still contain some seed heads, and those will create issues in the future.
Are there any materials that you would avoid?
Great question, Lori. Really, anything covering the soil is going to be a benefit in terms of protecting the soil from drying out and leaching nutrients, but some mulches are less ideal in a vegetable garden, particularly in areas where you want to grow crops. Wood products like bark mulch, wood chips, sawdust, etc. are all okay for paths, but in the garden beds, they'll lock up nitrogen, which will rob next year's garden plants of the necessary nutrients. Additionally, mulches like hay or even lawn clippings or straw applied too thinly will introduce unwanted seeds into the garden. So if you opt for organic mulches that may contain seeds, just be sure to apply them thickly.
Is there anything else you would add in the fall?
Yeah, fall is a great time to apply manure if you have some available. Manure is a great way to add organic matter and nutrients to the soil for next year's garden. But it does contain pathogens that can make people sick, so it's important to apply manure at least 120 days prior to harvesting any produce to ensure safety. Fall is an ideal time since you've already harvested and preserved all your bounty. If you decide to apply manure, particularly if it's from a source you're unfamiliar with, some important questions to consider would include, are the animals in the herd or flock healthy? Is there a parasite problem that requires regular deworming? Are antibiotics used as a regular component in their feeding program? While manure can add benefits to your soil, it also has the potential to add unwanted things, so check before you apply. Additionally, you should never apply manure from pigs, cats, or dogs to your garden.
Is there anything else you would encourage people to think about when putting their garden to bed?
Late fall in the garden means that most of our plants have been harvested or killed by frost. Things are winding down and we're turning our attention to getting ready for winter. But before you pack away those gardening gloves, you might want to consider planting my absolute favorite crop, which is garlic. Garlic is planted before the ground freezes, but not so early that you start to see green growth. Here in Mid-Coast Maine, where I am, this generally means around mid-October. But you can refer to our publication on growing garlic for guidance specific to your area. You'll want to choose a hardneck variety. Garlic from the grocery store generally consists of softneck varieties, which grow well in California and China, where they're generally produced, but not here in Maine. If you plan to plant garlic, seek out seed from a reputable source. Garlic can harbor pests and diseases, including garlic bloat nematode and white rot, and both can persist in your soil for many years and be really problematic. Once you've obtained your seed, choose the largest cloves to produce the largest bulbs. The cloves should be planted with their pointed end up, so that the point is about 2 to 4 inches from the soil surface. Space the cloves about 4 to 6 inches apart in rows, and space the rows about 6 to 12 inches apart. Once you've planted them, mulch your garlic well to prevent it from heaving out of the soil. You're going to want to mulch with about 6 to 8 inches of material. And in the spring, you'll be rewarded with one of the earliest crops to emerge. Just watch for the green shoots around the time that daffodils are blooming, and pull back the mulch a little bit from around the plants to encourage them to grow.
Thank you, Vina, Kate, and Lori. So to recap, when canning or freezing produce, always follow a tested recipe. Use a boiling water canner for high-acid foods and a pressure canner for low-acid foods. Freezing is quick and easy. Dehydrating and fermenting are also options. Root cellaring is easier than you might think. And don't leave your soil bare through the winter. More information is available on the University of Maine Cooperative Extension's website and in the video description. Please be sure to check out our next video in the series, I Dig Pain-Free Gardening.